Hey, this is Dylan Ryan here, doing a little creator's corner kind of conversation with myself, that is, about my last multimedia story reporting piece for my media writing Mass 213 class. This piece was called The Passing of the Clipboard. I did a profile piece on Colorado Mesa's newest assistant coach, Mike Mendoza. In this little conversation here, I'm just going to kind of touch on my planning for the story, my execution, and then kind of just how I ended up putting it all together here to the finished product that will be submitted tomorrow, basically. Filming this tonight now that I've officially put together everything else. Going into this, right from the minute that the multimedia story was presented to us and, basically assigned to us, I knew exactly that this was going to be my topic. I didn't have to there was not a lot of battling over what topic to do. As soon as I saw the assignment and saw the rubric, I knew I wanted to try to redo my web story, but in a better way. Because for my web story at the beginning of the semester, I just kind of ended up, even though it was meant to do more, I ended up more or less writing a public relations piece about the women's wrestling team starting their second season. I knew I still wanted to talk wrestling, and thus still wanted to talk sports. And just right there in that class period, I was just lucky enough to have the stroke of genius to decide, hey, let's look at the men's team instead, and to really personalize and kind of like section off the topic and make it something that you can't really write from a PR angle. Let's just make it a focused piece on the new coach that's come into the team. And I think it really kind of works out in circumstance, too, with me being a wrestler, because I'm kind of in on all the gossip. I was able to hear a lot about people's opinions about the new coach. Excuse me. And springboard right off of that to create my piece. With that said, my plan for the piece and the actual execution were different. So right there in that class, when I knew that that was my topic, I had first envisioned like writing the piece and then being able to actually sit down with Coach Mendoza and conduct almost like a documentary style interview with him, where I could just sit there and ask him questions and get kind of, like personalized answers and then make a little video with that. Did not end up working that way in actual execution, because the week that I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to Coach Mendoza and interview him, he ended up out of town all week at a wrestling clinic for coaches in Utah. And that was out of my control. That was beyond my power. Could not actually sit down with Coach Mendoza and record him in that time period. I ended up getting to talk to Coach Mendoza for the final piece, which worked out. I ended up giving him kind of a phone call just on his way back when he was driving and talking to him then, but did not ever actually get to make a video with him, which sucked because I figured he would get back soon enough that it would work. So I had just started filming stuff at practice, before and after practice, and in the weight room and just kind of all around the athletic facility that week. I was like, let me just see what I can scrounge up and use for this video. And none of it really ended up panning out, just because I couldn't sit down with Coach Mendoza. And as much footage as I shot, I knew I did not have enough just B-roll and random clips to make a full-length video, 2 minutes that is. So I ended up just making a 1 minute kind of introduction video that I had placed right at the start of the article before my actual article started. And besides that, the way I kind of made up for the absence of Coach Mendoza is by interviewing probably 3 times as many wrestlers as I should have. I think in my final article, only 3 or 4 names pop up, but I interviewed easily half the wrestling team, just asked them all kind of different iterations of the same question of, what do you think of Coach Mendoza? How has your experience with Coach Mendoza been so far? Is there anything that stands out about Coach Mendoza? That worked out. I got a lot of good quotes. I mean, they show up in my report, and thankfully quite a few athletes on our team here at CMU came with Coach Mendoza, so they had personalized experience with him beyond this season. That made it kind of easier to write a little bit, thanks to the opinions of Colin Metzger, Fred Green, and Kean Apple. They all kind of said the same things, though, That's the other thing. The biggest struggle was the similarity in answers that you get from athletes. As many good things as they said, they were all very similar things that each of the athletes said. So I could only really maybe incorporate so many of the 12 to 15 guys that I actually heard opinions from. But not very much of an opinion-driven piece to begin with. And I did, thankfully, when I called Coach Mendoza. Should have asked him maybe more serious questions, but the thing I got out of that call with Coach Mendoza that worked the best was his background on when he first started wrestling, because he told me the extended story of getting invited to a practice and kind of going to his first event and not really being a highly competitive wrestler, which then was very cool to compare with his accolades as a coach and also as a collegiate wrestler. So that's what I took away from Coach Mendoza. Even though in my mind, in the planning for the interview and in the planning for the article, I expected to be able to get like real gems from him almost about like coaching philosophy and about, running a program and building up athletes. None of that really came through. Instead, I kind of just let the opinions of the athletes speak to that side of Coach Mendoza. And instead, out of my conversation with him on the phone, all I got out of it was his initial interest in the sport. And I think I closed the article portion of the piece on his kind of just overall enthusiasm to take over. A big speculation amongst the wrestling team, but not amongst head coach Chuck Pfeiffer, is that eventually head coach Chuck Pfeiffer will relinquish his position to Coach Mendoza. As Coach Pfeiffer is now entering his 13th season here, it's likely he's ready to retire soon. He's older. He's gotten plenty of accomplishments. And Coach Mendoza has been waiting to find a school where he can settle. So it makes sense to me that would be in the works, which was another kind of fold to the overall piece that kind of gets thrown in there. Because, in my conversation with, in particular, Peyton Taywater, RMAC champion and fifth-year senior for the team, he even blatantly said outright, I think Coach Mendoza is going to take over the head coach spot. Didn't end up using that as juicy as it would be. Kind of used his words and reworded them and just kind of speculated on our own. Didn't end up using that direct quote. Should I have? Yes. But in the event that Coach Pfeiffer or someone else from the big executive side of the team were to read it, I wouldn't want them to have me be the one throwing that out there. So we kind of left it in the air. So the plan was solid and the execution was solid. It just was different. I think that has more to do with adaptability than actual having to go back to the drawing board and rework my story. I had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to do throughout all of it. And I didn't stray from that goal, even though I couldn't use the very specific devices I wanted to use to do it. But I'm very pleased with this article compared to my web story. I think I actually removed myself from this story. My article for the women's team put too much of the fact that, they're young and they're new and what could happen. And at that point, that's not an article. That's a think piece. I think with this, I made it very clear. This is the team. This is their new coach. This is what this new coach has done in the past. This is what all these athletes competing with the new coach think. And this is, even though it's still kind of an open-ended ending in that I can't tell you what's going to happen next, I think I make it more clear that all Coach Mendoza is seeing in his head, that is the immense amount of room to grow the program. Coach Pfeiffer has done well at consistently putting an All-American on the wall, putting a national qualifier on the mat, but he's never had breakthrough seasons with a dominant team. And I think overall that is Coach Mendoza's goal, is to create a dominant team. That is my takeaway from creating this piece, studying his past, and then looking at how athletes are responding to his training style. That Coach Mendoza is on a mission to create a dominant team. I didn't say that in the articles because he didn't directly say it. That's my takeaway, though. Thank you, Dylan Ryan. Kind of a little reflection here. I think the things I did well was removing myself. I think the things I did bad was getting the really, really juicy things, as is kind of the challenge in studying athletes, because they are such, they're doers. They're not really thinkers and speakers. But I love it. Thank you.